Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm super duper excited to be here with you. And look, today's episode is just like a little love letter from from my over-explaining heart to yours. So maybe you're like me. Like when I think back, not so much anymore these days. I've really put some effort into this this little part of my personality. Um, and I did it because I don't think it really served me, and I certainly didn't need to be exhausting myself anymore. But if you've ever felt like you should join Over Explainers Anonymous, just just go ahead and raise your hand right now along with me, double amen hands, right? Oh my God, Over Explainers Anonymous, which comes from, right, this desire it's really less of a desire. I think it's actually has roots in fear, like being afraid of being misunderstood. All right, but we're gonna dive into this. And here's what I was gonna say. Like I saw this really funny meme. So something happened last week that kind of made me think, oh, or like, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And I was like, oh, I kind of want to do an episode about this, around this kind of incident, right? And then I was like, and then I saw this meme yesterday. And this is kind of how my spiritual team works, or the universe works, or whatever you want to call it, divine timing. I just got the little universal nudge. And I saw this wicked funny meme, and it's from an account called just, instead of saying just forget about it, it was just frog get about it. So it's like using the word frog instead of forget. And this person draws these really cute little frogs, right? And there's basically, I'll hold it up real quick for those of you who are listening and not watching. I'll explain it. So there's like a little frog laying in a field on his back, and his legs are crossed, his arms are behind his head or her head, whatever. And their eyes are closed, and they just look really peaceful laying out in this field, right? Just forget about it. And this is what it says: explaining myself is too much work. Just judge me. I was like, oh my God, double amen hands to that. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's get into this. Here's the bottom line, guys. We cannot explain everything to everybody. We cannot explain ourselves to everybody, especially in this day and age. One of the things that I cannot stand about social media, and, some people loved the challenge when Twitter first came out. Everybody loved that challenge of like, oh, 144 characters. I have to write in a really succinct way to get my point across, whatever. And Instagram, same thing. Like Facebook allows you to be a little bit more of a long form writer, which I am, right? So, yeah, I can write short, punchy little one-liners if I have to, but the way that I like to communicate is I like to make sure that what I'm trying to convey is actually understood. Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy has this quote, I'm paraphrasing, but it's basically like the heartbeat of it is like, AT, art is transferring feeling from one heart to another. And when I'm transferring things from my heart or my mind, I want them to kind of be understood. Now, message sent, right? And I've mentioned this before on my show. My first year at BU at Boston University, it was like my third year. My communications teacher, my first class with her, she said, the message sent when you're communicating, the message you send is almost never the message received. And I've never forgotten that. And obviously, because I keep talking about it. But what I think about is I imagine these two people. So just imagine two people standing facing each other, right? And one is sending words across the void between the two of them to the ears of the other person. Well, you're not just communicating to this person, you're communicating to their history, you're communicating to their trauma, you're communicating through their stories, their beliefs, their culture. You're communicating to what they think of themselves. You're communicating to their subconscious and their conscious mind, right? That's a lot of layers. That's a lot of filters. That's a lot of interpretation between what you say and what they actually hear, right? So it's as human beings, it really is helpful to like, and this is why like a daily spiritual practice can be so powerful, because it teaches us how to slow the fuck down so we can actually pause. We can put a little pause in between what we think and what we say, what we think and what we do, right? That little gap, as Viktor Frankl talks about in between stimulus and response, there's a space. There's that little moment where you get to choose, right? But here's the thing, no matter how mindful you're being sometimes, other people just are not gonna get the message. So some of us who are really sensitive, or some of us who have felt, and this was me, right? I often felt misunderstood growing up. I always felt like, I shouldn't say always, there were a handful of people who saw me, who got me. My mother was one of them. Miss LaFeb, Kay LaFeb, Miss totally got me. There were certain friends and people that you had in your life that they just saw you, they understood you, they got you. You didn't have to over explain yourself. But those relationships are usually few and far between. So I often felt like I had to explain myself to be understood. And I was so afraid of people misinterpreting, misunderstanding what I said or what I did. And they weren't curious enough to follow up. And that's the thing. If you're talking to another person who doesn't really care about you, doesn't really like you, doesn't really want to put in the time, they're not somebody who really gives in relationships, they're not going to lean in and give you the benefit of the doubt and say, I don't really know what she meant by that. And instead of writing some story about you, like, oh, she's an asshole, or she's mean, or she's this, she's that, they would ask you to clarify. They ask you for more information, like, tell me more, so that they can truly understand you. But think about right now, just pause and think in your adult life. Who are you in continuous or constant relationship with? Like a person or whoever, who you feel like this person really, really gets me. And here's what I want to say to you. If you can think of at least one person, take some time in the next 24 hours to call them, to write them, send them a handwritten note, text them something, communicate to them how much you value the fact that not only have they taken the time to truly get to know you in your heart, but that they often, I always say to people, we're always writing stories about ourselves and each other in the world, right? What if we started writing stories in each other's favor? What if we just don't assume that person's being an asshole, that person is this way or that way, right? So here's the thing. I was an over-explainer, and I'm sure to other people it could be exhausting. They'd be like, why are you saying this 3 different ways? I got it the first time, right? But for me, for a long time, I was like, I just didn't want this to be misunderstood. And there are still times to this day where if I'm speaking on a stage, or if I'm like having a conversation with somebody or whatever, and if my sweetie is there, I will often turn to him later. I do this with my best friend KT too. And I'll always go like this: was I mean? Was I just mean? Because I'm all like, I never want to be mean. I never want to be unkind, right? I do like to be clear. And I don't mind being loving and firm, right? Loving but firm. That I can do with, but I never want to come across as being like unkind, right? That just doesn't feel good in my body. But here's the truth. We can do our best to try to explain, but there are going to be times when you can't explain. You can't explain why you feel the way that you feel. And there have been times, I'm going to give you a couple of personal examples. There have been times in my life when I just knew that I had to do a thing, and I knew it was going to be misunderstood. I knew the other person wasn't going to be happy. I knew the other person was probably going to be upset. And so there were these 2 collaborations that were possibilities. And the first one, it goes way back. I'm talking like 2003, 23 years ago, when I was first thinking about opening up a yoga studio. And I was friendly with this woman, and we were talking about doing it together. And we were looking at spaces, and we were going back and forth. And I finally found this space, and I realized like just something in the deepest part of me was like, you need to do this on your own. Like, this is your thing to do and to figure out on your own. And so I found the space, and then I had to communicate with this person that, and it was fine. They went on to open up their own space, and I think that was great. And over time, I can't speak for her, but I can tell you for myself, it became very clear to me that our styles and our approaches to things were really different. So thank God, thank goodness, right, that we didn't do it. We saved ourselves that clusterfuck. But in the beginning, it was really uncomfortable. And especially if you were a kid who kind of grew up in a household or a world where what you wanted didn't matter, right? There are a lot of things. When you're a kid, this is the thing I always try to remind adults and parents sometimes, is that when you're a little kid, so much is out of your control. And that can be really frustrating because you're told basically when to get up, when to go to bed, when to brush your teeth, when to eat, what to eat, how to eat. People are deciding your food choices for you, like everything, your clothes, like whatever, right? So much when you're a little kid, like you have no say. Right. And you do feel that's why little kids once in a while will go, you're not the boss of me, because their own agency and their own authorship and their own autonomy is like rising up. Right. But there are just going to be times when you don't have a lot of control about things. Okay. So there are going to be times when and I'm back. There are going to be times when you can't explain why you feel the way that you feel and you just have to do a thing. And I knew I was going to upset that person and they were upset with me for a little bit. And I was like, but I just knew like I had to do this thing and I'm glad I did it. It was wicked uncomfortable at the time, you know. And here's what I was going to say. When you were a kid who didn't have a lot of choice, right? When you were younger, you know, when you get older, like you kind of want that autonomy and stuff like that. But what you also end up doing sometimes when you how do I say this? When you're a kid who grew up with like trauma, let's start there. When you're a kid who grew up with like a lot of trauma and stuff like that, and you just wanted to make everybody around you happy, right? When you became a little bit of a people pleaser, because that deep, 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 like subconscious fear is if I do something they don't like, I'm going to be kicked out of the tribe, right? I'm going to be kicked out of the family. I'm going to be sent to Siberia, as my sewing teacher used to say when she didn't like you. She would threaten to send you to Siberia, right? And that's a truly primal, like deep fear, is that I am going to get ousted from my family, from my group, from what keeps me safe or what I know, right? What's familiar or whatever. And it can be really scary to stand up to for yourself and to claim something and to say, this is what I want, right? When you weren't taught that what you wanted mattered, what you needed. And that goes back to when you're a little kid and you feel out of control. People are always telling you, this is what you're getting. You didn't have a choice. So, in order to feel safe, you would just kind of like try to make yourself irreplaceable. I always say I would Cirque du Soleil myself. I would contort myself into all these shapes. I'll be whatever you need me to be. Just love me, right? And as I got older, I was like, no, like I had to start exercising that muscle. Was like, I have to trust my inner teacher. I have to trust that inner calling, that inner voice, call it gut instinct, intuition, divine intelligence, loving intelligence, spiritual team, Holy Spirit, whatever you call it, that inner nudge, that inner voice that's like, no, you've got to do this. And it won't be fucking comfortable. It's not going to be comfortable when you start making choices for yourself. So that was the first time. The second time is that there was a workshop that I wanted to lead. And in the beginning, it had been talked about possibly doing it with this other person. And then there was some things that happened. I don't want to get too much into it. There were some things that happened. And in the end, I was like, I got an opportunity brought to me. I didn't seek it out. Somebody reached out to me. They offered the gig to me, and I took it. And I just knew, and I lamented over this. I literally cried over this. And I was like talking to my sweetie about it. And I was just like crying. And I'm like, I just need to do this. And he agreed with me. He's like, you should do this. And I know that I upset that other person. And things were strained for a bit afterwards, but I just knew that I was doing what was right for me. And that was really, really hard to exercise that muscle when you were a person who was always thinking about other people first. Partly, yes, because you're a nice person, but partly out of survival instincts, right? It wasn't always because like, oh, I'm just such a nice person. Like part of it was like desperation, right? And so that was really, really hard for me. Because the hardest part not only was having other people be upset with you or whatever, that you were that they were like angry or felt hurt or whatever, because I hate hurting people. But my inner critic voice, that inner critic voice can be really loud. And it's like, you are so selfish. They're going to be mad. They won't like you. They're not going to understand. And then you try to over explain and they're still not getting it. And the whole thing just gets mucky and messy and sticky and icky. And the whole thing was just so not soothing. But here's what I've come to accept as a grown-ass adult, right, in 2026. You, just by the nature of being human, you cannot please everybody all the time. You can't make everybody happy, and you will let people down. You will disappoint people. Sometimes you'll even disappoint animals, right? This is the nature of being human, is that there are going to be times when we need to do something. And sometimes we can explain ourselves, but other times we can't explain ourselves. We don't know. It's just like, I just have this feeling that I need to do this thing. I can tell you story after story after story, right? But I think about let me give you an example of how like you can't explain yourself to everybody. You know, when little kids are sick and you have to give them a medicine and the medicine tastes like shit and they don't want to take it and they're crying, or you take your kid to go get a shot, right? Or something like whatever it is, or they have to go get stitches. Who knows what it is, right? Little kids, little babies or whatever, like they don't understand why you need to give it to them, really. They don't understand that what you're doing is good for them. And it's awful. I can only imagine as a parent, watching your baby cry because they're getting a shot or they're getting some sort of procedure or whatever. And they're just like, why? Like taking them to the dentist or whatever the thing is. And when you think about dogs, when dogs get neutered or spayed, it's good for them. It's the best thing for them, right? Like you have to do it. It's how we keep the populations down in the shelters so animals aren't getting euthanized. It's good for their health. It's good for aggression. It's good for marking. It's good for like so many things, right? But they have to wear that cone of shame, or they have to wear the little bodysuit, so they have to wear the little donuts, and they don't like it. And you can't explain to them because they don't always understand, right? You can't say to them, look, I'm doing this because I love you. It's what's best for you, right? Like sometimes you just can't explain it. And it happens with adults too sometimes. And I had a situation recently. I'm not going to go too much into it except to say that there was a really big misunderstanding with somebody that I was communicating with. And they got really upset. They got really angry, like yelling angry. And they had misinterpreted something that I was doing with my face and a sound that I made. That's all I'm going to say about it. And they were yelling at me. And I let them like get their feelings out and say how they wanted to feel. And at some point, because we don't know each other that well, we had recently met. And just at some point, I just said, they're like, you did X, Y, and Z. And I said, yeah, I did do those things, but that's not how I meant it. That's a misinterpretation, right? So here's my greatest fear. Here's my greatest fear happening in real time. It's not my greatest fear. Here's one of my big fears, that I am being misunderstood, and I'm being misunderstood in a way that doesn't reflect who I truly am, which is unsoothing on multiple levels. But it was frustrating. And I also got angry. But what happens when I get angry and frustrated is I cry. So it looks like I'm sad, which on one level I am, because I could clearly see that this was a breach of, like, this is a big miscommunication and misunderstanding. But I was also frustrated because I was being seen in a light that wasn't true. But we both felt that way, right? In fairness, we both felt that way. And what I finally said to this other person was, you don't know me well enough yet to know that that's not what I was doing, that that's not what I meant. I said, you don't know me well enough yet. And I said, if you knew me, you wouldn't think that about me. If you really knew me, you wouldn't think that about me. And this is just something that I'm like, oh yeah, this is something that I can see how things go really wrong when we're trying to communicate. And sometimes we just have to say, like, look, you don't know me well enough to make that assumption about me. Because here's the truth. And I'm not saying this next piece about that person. I'm just talking about humans in general now. Some people are going to insist on misunderstanding you. Some people are going to insist on being offended. And some people, and this is why I believe, because some people need to keep the story they've written about you true in their own head. They need to keep it alive. They need to keep it true in their head so that they can keep making excuses, so they can keep making you the bad guy, so that they don't have to take responsibility, so they don't have to own their part of things, and they don't have to look at themselves. And that's just facts. Some people want to put you in a little box and see you in a very particular way, and they are not open to software updates. They're not open to new information. They're not interested in different perspectives, putting themselves in your shoes, or looking at things from a different point of view. They're just not into it. And how they think of you is not open to change. They're just not willing to do it. And this is what I would say to you. Don't waste your time trying to convince them otherwise. You can tell them, just judge me. Like this little frog. Explaining myself is too much work. Just judge me. There's certain people that it is not worth your time. Don't waste your time. Because here's the thing. Tell them just judge me because they're going to anyways. This is what the ego mind does. The ego mind judges all day long, right? We look at people outside, immediately a thought comes in your head. You're making a comment about their glasses or their clothes or their whatever, or how they're talking or what they're doing or why they're doing it that way, right? The ego mind loves to separate. It loves to make us special, either by making us superior or shittier. It loves to play that comparison game, right? All this judgment, right? There's a difference between judgment and discernment. There's a difference between judgment and observation. There's a difference between judgment and then just kind of making your report about what you're seeing. But people are going to judge us, so just let them do it. And all you can do, I'm going to wrap this up now. All you can do is to do your best to be clear in your communications. Remember, message sent is almost never the message received. But all you can do is do your best to be clear in your communications. Be kind in your delivery. If there's one thing I would say to people, and I had to say it to myself 1,000 times over the years, is you got to watch your fucking tone of voice. You got to watch what it's like, right? When you're talking, when you're saying things, and try to put yourself on the receiving end of your own message, your own words, and your own tone. Right. Oh, yeah. Like once in a while, you have to go like, oh, yeah, I can see how you would have perceived it that way. Right. What was my face doing? What was my tone of voice doing? And this is how misunderstanding happens. And if people don't know you, a lot of times they're going to assume the worst. Okay. So be clear in your delivery. Try to be kind. Watch your tone of voice. And the rest is kind of out of your hands. Sometimes, though, it is worth explaining yourself. When there's a genuine misunderstanding, like I recently had, right? And you care about the person or you care about the relationship and you want to repair it and you want it to be, to feel good and you want there to be like, you care enough to make the friendship or the relationship work. It's important that you take a little bit of time, but you also have to use discernment because the rest of the time you've just got to let go of it. It's out of your control and you got to say, let them judge me, right? They're going to judge me anyways, just judge me. I don't have the time and the energy. And what I was saying about social media earlier, I don't know if I finished my point, is that, there was never like long form content is why I love is because I can be clear and there's enough room. So for there to be nuance. A lot of times on social media, they're trying to force you to communicate in these little quips and these little snippets and these little catchy things because for whatever reason, people can't read longer than 2 sentences, right? I am not a TLDR person, too long, don't read. I'm a reader. You know who reads things? Readers do. People who love words, people who love books, etc. Right? So we're often being forced into these little containers and we can't be, how do I say it? This is the best way to say it, it's really easy to be misunderstood online because there's not enough characters and not enough room in a post to hit all the different ways. And that's why I always say on the podcast, hey, I reserve the right to change my mind. I reserve the right to be smarter next time. I reserve the right to have learned something on 357 episode than I did on episode 62. I might become a little smarter, a little better, a little kinder. You know what I mean? So that's my thing to you guys. You can't explain everything to everybody. You can't explain yourself to everybody. Some people are going to insist on misunderstanding you because that's how they want to look at you and that's how they want to see you. When it matters, take the time to do it. But other than that, just tell them, just judge me. All right, you guys. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, whatever time you're listening to this. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for helping me to celebrate 7 years of the Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate it. Wherever you go out in the world, please leave the animals, the people, the places, yourself, the planet better than how you first found it. Wherever you go, may you and your energy and your love and your presence and your communication be a blessing. Bye.